Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get started and people will be joining us as they join us. I wanted to say good evening to everyone and welcome to the Cary Library's presentation of 4 indie YA authors. My name is Michelle Techler and I am the Teen Services Manager here at Cary Library. This is our second annual event of this type, again spearheaded by our own Lucy Gold, who is a Lexington teen and a faithful and frequent library patron, and now also a published author. So Lucy originally approached me in 2021, interested in holding a virtual indie authors event, and she planned it and she moderated an event last year, which was really, really fun. And so we both decided that we wanted to have it happen again this year. So for tonight's program, Lucy has gathered 3 different authors from last year. We have, let's just correct me if I get this wrong, Lena say it now, please just say it.
Lena Amargo.
Amargo. So you just
everybody gets it wrong. It's totally fine.
Told me 2 seconds ago and I missed it. And Cass Marin and Meg Mayer. And since Lucy has now published her first book, she will be joining them both as a moderator and as a panelist. So, which is pretty amazing. So without further ado, I am happy to introduce Lucy Gold, who will be taking the evening from here.
Hi, as Michelle said, my name is Lucy Gold. I am a teen self-published author. As of November, it's been just over 2 months and it's absolutely crazy. If you're interested, I wrote a Peter Pan retelling. It's Creator Meets Creation, where Wendy is a writer and she lives in Victorian London and sort of goes over to Neverland. And it's been a long ride and it's part of the first of a trilogy. And I'm just super excited to be a published author and to get to talk to all of these amazing authors. And before I hand it over to them to introduce themselves, I just want to outline how this evening will go. So I'm gonna ask my questions and for about an hour, and then as that happens, you put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and then after an hour, I will be asking your questions, so you can direct them specifically to authors, or it can be a generalized question about writing, whatever floats your boat. So without further ado, Meg, why don't you start?
Hi, so my name is Meg Mayer. It's a pen name, and I only have 2 works published under it. My poetry collection and Unmasked, which the first edition is published under Meg Paulson, as are my other novels. The other novels are published through a company called Fast Pencil Publishing, and the rest are through Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. I'm Cass Marin. I am a recently published author. Last year, while I've been working on my debut novel, I was actually published in 2 short story anthologies. The first of which was a Forbidden Delights anthology, my short story called Like Flies to Honey. All of our stories were based off of food items, which hence the name. And I was very lucky enough to be a co-author with Lena Amargo, who's here tonight, in an anthology published through her publishing company, Silver Wheel Press. Our anthology, Fate and Fury, A Deadly Sin anthology, features my short story, Forget Me Not, which is based on the sin of greed, a retelling of that sin. I'm currently working on my debut novel, like I said, for the past 5 years or so now, and it is a fantasy sword and sorcery type of novel.
Hi, my name is Lena Amargo. I am the author of the Children of Lear trilogy, which is a young adult fantasy trilogy. It features pirates and some forbidden romance and lots of other tropes. There's 3 books in that series. The last one, Mother of the Moon, was just released this last December, which is very exciting. And like Cass mentioned, I am also the owner of Silver Wheel Press, which is an independent publishing company. And we just did a short story anthology called A Fate and Fury, which followed all 7 sins and then a forgotten 8th sin. And I was lucky enough to write for both Pride and Despond. So that was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, thank you all for coming. It is an absolute privilege and honor to have you guys on this panel. To begin, could each of you outline the process of self-publishing, or rather the path you guys took?
So when I first self-published, it was when I was in 6th grade. And the reason I did that was because I had my teacher, she made all the 6th graders and 5th graders do NaNoWriMo. And obviously we were a little young to write 50,000 words in a whole month. So I ended up writing 19,000 my first year in 5th grade and then publishing in 6th grade. And I did it all through NaNoWriMo, through the Young Writers program, and they offered deals. If you chose one publishing company, you could get discounts for that. So that's just the journey I took, and that kind of influenced me to publish more books since then. So yeah.
So as of now, I've been very lucky enough to be a collaborator on 2 anthologies, which means I haven't gone through the entire self-publishing process solo, which I highly recommend if you just want to get your feet wet. So I don't have the full experience doing it solo like Lena does, but she's been a great tutor as I got to see what she did while we published our anthology, and gave me a lot of tips for going forward for my book. So I have some plans, but I'm still a little ways off from that. But in general, it's really fun to collaborate with other people. We did a lot of research based on the experiences Lena had, for example, publishing her trilogy. So I'll let her do the nitty gritty.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. I actually didn't even know self-publishing was a thing until I was in college. That's right around when I had started writing more seriously. I'd always loved writing, but I didn't have the opportunity when I was younger. And I was actually on an online forum just trying to workshop my writing. It's how Daughter of the Deep, my first book, even started, was just based on a short story. And in one of the chats, people were talking about submitting to traditional publishing houses versus self-publishing. And I got so excited because I'm a control freak. And the idea of self-publishing was really nice, having all of the control for myself and really getting to pace my journey based off of what felt right for me. I'm not a full-time author. I have another job, and just the idea of self-publishing and taking it at my pace just meant so much for me. So I looked into it, and then I had to set up all the business things, which is more intense than you'd think it is, but I had some really great friends as well who sort of led me along. I believe one of them was a panelist last year, Renee, and just a wonderful resource, and a lot of other kind people that gave me free advice, even though, I was just a newbie. So that's kind of how I got into self-publishing, and I'm happy about my decision since then because it's been such a fun ride.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I could not have done what I did. I could not have published without the community I had behind me, without the advice of those who have done this before me, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to do this panel, is because I wanted to share the knowledge. I wanted to make it more accessible. And Meg, you mentioned NaNoWriMo. For those who don't know what that is, would you mind explaining?
Yeah, of course. So NaNoWriMo stands for National Novel Writing Month. It takes place in the month of November, and writers are challenged to write 50,000 words in a month. There's also a Young Writers program version of that, where you get to choose your word count until you turn 18. But after 18, you're challenged to write 50,000 words in 30 days.
It's hard. I speak from experience. It's very hard. I did it this most recent November. When I tell you I was waking up at 5 a.m. every morning because I have to go to school. So I was like writing an hour before I would go to school. And wow, it's all of December was a writing break for me. It's a lot. So I know, Lena, you said that control was a big thing for you when choosing self-publishing. For each of you, what's one reason you chose self-publishing over traditional publishing? And Lena, you cannot say control.
So for me, it was my only option, like at the time when I was publishing, because I published when I was first 12, and then I published twice in middle school, once in high school, and then once again in college. So I didn't really have any other options when I was that young. I mean, I guess I could have tried to find other options, but self-publishing was what I was happy with, and it's what I've stuck with because I'm also not a full-time author. I am in college and I'm working to get my master's in social work. So I can't do that. Like, I can't do writing full-time. So I'm happy with self-publishing because that gives me like the freedom to do other things and other priorities.
Similar to both Lena and Meg said, like the freedom and control of having it. I know Lena wasn't supposed to say control, but I am also a control freak. I really like to lay all the details out. I'm very detail oriented. I have a huge imagination for how I want my publishing journey to go, and I just get really excited about the whole process. I really love the marketing of it. Choosing little details such as the covers, just the formatting, just all those little things which you don't really have a ton of control with traditional publishing. I know that there are people that will let you control things in that aspect, but to have total and complete control of those decisions is something that played a huge role in this for me. And going into this knowing that at the end of the day, this product that I'm putting out there, this project that I'm working on is 100% and completely mine. And I did this, and it's something I can really be proud of.
Yeah, I'll agree with what both Meg and Cass said. I think for me, on top of the control, there's also this sense of freedom that comes with self-publishing because I really get to be involved in every single phase of the process. And it really reflects the story that I want to tell. And not to say that that can't happen in traditional publishing, but I do think that there is definitely a different pace of how it happens and so many more other focuses. Whereas for me, it really wasn't about, trying to be famous or marketing to what people really want to read right now and figuring it out that marketing game. For me, it was really about, I want to tell stories. This is something that I'm passionate about. And I really like the freedom of looking at all those little details and getting to decide and be the only voice I have to listen to. Obviously, constructive feedback is always helpful, but that was really the core of it for me. Not to say that traditional publishing isn't also amazing.
Yeah, I would say control was a big thing for me too. I like knowing everything that's happening all the time. Like I cannot send an email to someone and not have their response in like the next few minutes. It's too much for me. Let alone sending off a new book and not getting it back for like a month. Like that was hard just to send to my editor. Like that was a big thing. And as a teen, I know that it's pretty expensive to self-publish. Did you guys run into any issues regarding money, like not being able to publish when you wanted to, or like some issues, things you had to cut?
So when I was like in elementary, middle, and high school publishing through Fast Pencil Publishing, there were two options, and the options were $20 to publish on Fast Pencil or $200 to like publish your book through like BarnesandNoble.com, like Amazon, like all the big like online sellers. And obviously, as a 12 to like 16-year-old when I was publishing, I'm not going to have $200 to self-publish a book. So I kind of just had to stick with the just having it on fast pencil, which really limited like sales because only people like in the United States could buy. When I switched to Amazon, it's not nearly as expensive. So that was really nice, and I didn't find any issues with that personally.
So I've been lucky enough to self-publish with collaboratively with the anthology, so I haven't had to actually put in any costs of my own. Thanks, Lena, for that. However, I do know how expensive it can be. It's something that I've been planning for, especially because self-publishing is something that I'm really passionate about. So, and even as an adult with a full-time job, I have to really be cognizant of my expenses and how much really things are going to cost. I do try to look into talk to other authors and see what kind of expenses they've had, because there are a lot of routes that are not the priciest. They can be a lot cheaper if you just kind of look around for them and talk to other people. I think the writing community has been such a huge a great source for that, is people are willing to share their resources. Not everyone is possessive over that, and I think that that's been really great for me as I plan my novel release when I do that.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Cass on that last part. I think it was an expense for me at first, and it did take me a while to save up. I was lucky enough by the time that I was ready to publish, I was already working full time, and so was my husband. So we were able to set some money aside for that. But I was aware of what those costs would be thanks to some resources, friends who, again, told me what to expect. And there are definitely some things that I think personally shouldn't be cut corners on, right? I think hiring a professional editor is so important just to enhance your craft, right? And I never mind shelling out money for that, right? But there were other ways that, again, because we have full control, there was the option to kind of do it in-house and save some money. So I did all my own book formatting rather than pay a formatter, and learned how to use Word and all sorts of things, and to format that. And then I did my own chapter headers and figured out how to draw on Procreate. So I only had to spend $10 for the app rather than, paying somebody else to do the art. So I think that there are a lot of ways to creatively try and save costs, but being aware of it and budgeting is an important part. And that definitely is one of the inhibitors for a lot of self-published authors. I think part of the reason that I've wanted to do anthologies and stuff was to give people who maybe didn't have the same privilege that I had a space to publish and have a voice without necessarily the same gatekeeping that we see in traditional publishing.
Yeah. I just want to say that I do love the anthology that both you and Cass have done. You might guys remember I was an ARC reader, and I just loved it so much. You guys, everyone should go read it. It's amazing. I love it. And so we've talked about the best things about self-publishing, the freedom, the control, like how you can do what you want to do. But what are some of the worst things?
I mean, I feel like this is a given, but being able to market your book is like the worst thing about self-publishing. Like I have a pretty big platform on Instagram. Like I have almost 20,000 followers, and I think I only made about $100 when I like marketed my poetry collection, which like given that I have like such a big base, like, and I was not really able to sell as many copies as I like predicted, was like a bit like disheartening. But honestly, you can't really be disheartened by that, because that's still like, I think like 20 or so people still like bought that collection, which like made me happy. So
That's a good point. I actually really like the marketing aspect of it, because I really enjoy like promoting and designing, ways to engage people with my stories. But it is really difficult too, right? Because, on social platforms, how do you hold people's attention? I know a lot of things are moving over to more like Reels and TikTok versions of marketing. And that's hard for, somebody who has a lot of anxiety about getting in front of a camera or maybe doesn't have the time or even like the fancy props that some other people have. And I know people can get really creative. So I've really enjoyed seeing how people have been working on that. But I do think that that's a very difficult piece of it, trying to engage enough people to really get interested in your story and stand out. You're especially in the fantasy genre, which is really popular right now. Trying to make your story seem important enough for people to stop, pay attention, even for a few minutes. So that's definitely difficult, aside from the expense, which I think is the worst part. But that I would say this is the second worst.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. I think that it's really hard too, because there'll be a marketing thing that I feel like I'll spend a lot of time on and put a lot of my energy into, and it'll go unnoticed, right? With like minimal views or likes or interactions. And then I'll take 3 minutes and do something just without even thinking about it. And that'll be the thing that, gets some attention. And it's really hard to try to understand how people are engaging. And on that note, I also think that there's a loneliness, success or failure with traditional publishing. I do think that there is that teamwork element, right? It's not just one person's creative endeavors, it's a whole group. So you can either celebrate or, mourn failures together. In the indie world, a lot of the times it's, you're taking on that all by yourself and celebrating for yourself or not, right? I just released the last book in my trilogy, and I did a virtual something just like this to celebrate, but then I turned the camera off and I was alone in my office, right? And I think that that's a feeling that not a lot of indies talk about, but is really hard when you're kind of a one-person show.
Yeah, 100%. I remember I published my book on November 14th. The next day I went to school and didn't exist, like it didn't happen. And it's like you really are like your own team. Like you have people cheering for you, but like hardly is it ever people physically in your life that they can be like, they can give you a hug, they can like throw confetti in the air. Like that's not always what happens, especially since COVID. And it's also disappointing that on Instagram, people will follow you, like Meg said, they'll follow you, they'll like hype up your post, but they won't actually interact with your physical novel or your ebook. And it's really sad because no one really gives it a chance. They're just like, well, I've seen those posts on Instagram or those reels, like, or those TikToks, like I've seen them. I know what the book's about. I'm all set. And it's really sad because like, I know Meg's poetry book, I ran to buy it like the moment it was available, and it's amazing. Like I beta read it and I still bought it because that's what you do. You support your friends. And it's incredible, and it really speaks to, it's just really relatable. And I think it's sad that so many people like follow you on Instagram and then like no one does anything. But moving on to something a little more positive, if there was one singular piece of advice you could give to young authors considering self-publishing, what would it be?
I feel like I need to take my own advice. I'm gonna give it right now, but I definitely need to take it to heart. Is when you publish, don't publish like for other people, publish for yourself. Like publish because you want to publish and you want to physically hold like your book in your hands and be like, I wrote this. Don't publish because you want like to be like not famous, but like that you won't. I mean, that's a good reason to publish, but it's not the reason to publish. Like publish because you want to, because it makes you happy, and like that's all that really matters.
Yeah, jumping off of what Meg said, my advice would be to really pinpoint why you want to self-publish. Because for some people, I think traditional is the right route, whereas, self-publishing may be more for you. And when you decide the why you want to publish, whether it's, because you want to hold your book in your hand, which is something that I want to do, versus maybe you really do, want your book to be a movie or, whatever it is, that's a valid, desire. once you figure out that why, you need to work towards that. And that looks differently for everybody's journey looks differently for that. I think a lot of people who, want that popularity of their book, you want lots of people to love that book too, not just yourself. It takes a lot of hard work on the self-publishing route, because like Lena said, like Meg said, it's a lot of promoting. It's a long journey, and that's not to discourage people from going that route, but if that's what you want to do, definitely be in it to like work hard for that, because I think that's important to know up front.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? Figuring out the why. But I think for me, I guess the best advice that I probably needed to receive too was just that your story is worth telling. And that might take some persistence and patience, right? It might not all happen at once. You might not get any readers right away. But if you want to tell your story, tell it, and readers will come. And you can be persistent about it. And eventually you will have readers who care because you care about it. I think that is one of the most invaluable traits any author can have, traditional or otherwise, right? If you really believe in your story, people experience your sincerity and want to echo it back.
100%. Basically all my advice is the advice you guys just gave. I would say, other than that, don't let the bad reviews get to you. Unfortunately, as I published my first book, I had a ton of bad reviewers, and some of them hadn't even read the book. They were just review bombing, and I was like I was crying in school in my mom's office because she works there. Like, I was crying because it got to me, because I was like, you work so hard on something, you put out into the world, and not everyone's going to receive it well. And I had been told, don't take the bad reviews to heart, but it's not until you actually get a bad review that you realize how hard it is not to let it get to you. So that would be my advice. Just breathe through it. If you need to cry, cry. Let yourself acknowledge that you feel this way, but you're going to have to move past it, or you won't ever get anywhere with your writing. And I want to remind everyone watching this that if you want to ask these authors or me a question, you can put it in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will get to them when I am done asking these authors my questions. Okay, moving on to our next question. Do you think that working with other authors on their projects and yours via author advice on your project, or readers reading your projects or you reading others, how has that helped your projects reach their full potential?
For me, it's helped significantly because I like having beta readers for my own projects, and I also like beta reading for other people. Like, I beta read for Lucy over my break, which is really fun, and just like getting to experience that is like very helpful for like my own stories, because I hate editing my own stories, but like getting practice and like looking for kind of key important, like, I guess not flaws, but like things I might need to like fix in my own stories is really hard since I've written that. And so looking at other people's and like having questions posed to me that I look for in other like stories is very helpful for my own.
So I also have had a really positive experience working with other people. I started out, I've been writing for my pretty much my whole life, since I could really hold a pencil. And it's been a very solo journey for me. I was very shy about sharing my work, very passionate about storytelling my whole life, but I didn't really like sharing it with other people. I was always afraid what people would think. People might think I'm weird because I have, such a vivid imagination and tell, silly stories or whatever the reason was. But when I joined the author community, I think that was a big part of what I was looking for, was to find somebody to share that journey with and to really open myself up to that. And I could not be where I am today without those people. I've had critique partners and early readers, alpha readers. Even my mom, who does not like fantasy, has been a very helpful reader of my book. And it's been so instrumental into my growth as an author. I used to think, my writing wasn't too bad, and it wasn't terrible, but I've grown so much. That's something that I'm just so proud of. And I've learned so much from authors. I've gotten the privilege of having Lena as a critique partner. And I really enjoy the critiquing. I know a lot of people are, afraid of negative feedback, and I don't want to call it negative feedback. I call it critiquing. You really have to find a good partner for these things to work, because you don't want somebody that's just going to come in and tell you your work sucks or tell you just flowery, beautiful things about your work. You want somebody that finds that right balance and it's going to strengthen your writing. And I just love when like my critique partners tear apart my work, because it helps me really think outside of the box, and it helps me grow as, to make my work better. And where it is now, I could not have done that without other people, other authors helping me along this journey.
Cass is really humble, and there's never really much to tear apart, just as a side note. But I will agree. I think that it is so essential to have just people who are going to challenge you, but also support you. I can honestly say I would have quit writing all of my books 100 times if I didn't have either critique partners or beta readers sort of on the other side encouraging that I keep telling the story. But on the flip side, right, there have been so many times where I've been really frustrated or too close to projects to really be able to see what they needed. And having that outside reflective perspective absolutely was just the click of inspiration I needed to push through. So if you don't know where to start, writing advice groups or the writing community is typically really welcoming. But like Cass said, kind of finding your people that are going to push you and also support you, and going from there. I think it's a really great experience if you find the right people.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's really all about finding your community. I was lucky enough to have Renee Dugan, who was a panelist on the last panel, be my CP for my first book. And it would 100% not be the book it is today without her advice. And it really, really is a balance between pushing someone to their limits and building them up. But Cass, you mentioned alpha readers, CPs, beta readers. Would you mind sort of explaining to our viewers or watchers what sort of those terms mean?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. So I guess I'll start with the alpha reader, because that would be, right at the beginning, who's going to see the raw, ugly, I say ugly, but like the stuff that you don't want anybody else seeing, but you need an opinion. That's what an alpha reader usually would jump in and do. I have one of my best friends who, when I started developing my fantasy novel, I would just kind of throw draft chapters at him, and I would say, "Hey, what do you think? Is this dumb?" And it was very helpful for me, because I respect him as a writer. A CP is a critique partner. Those are generally used. It's very widely used in the self-publishing community, especially because in the traditional publishing realm, a lot of people would, even if they had a critique partner, they may use a developmental editor for something like that. A critique partner sort of steps in and does what a developmental editor might do, which is they're going to take a look at everything from the ground up, whether it's, the story, the characters, the descriptions, the plot, even grammar here and there. Like, those are all helpful things, but to really make sure you're telling the story the way you want to be telling it. And then beta readers, those are the ones you want when you're getting close. You're done with what you can do, and now you need outside eyes to really look at your story and tell you, does this work? Is it ready? And that's kind of like the last step before it goes to an editor, is, I think. But Lena and Meg and you are much more. I haven't even gone to beta readers yet, so you're probably a little bit more well-versed in that than I am.
No, I think you did a very good job explaining it, much more eloquent than I could have. I know for me, I skipped out on alpha readers because my schedule because I had a very, very strict publishing schedule, because I'm the kind of person who needs to jot everything out. So I didn't have time for alpha readers, but I did do CPs and betas, and then I sent it off to my editor. So yes, pretty much the schedule. So, Meg, what is it like balancing writing with school? How do you do it? Like, what are your techniques? Like, how do you focus?
So honestly, I take a lot of breaks from like working on my novel at the moment. I don't think I've touched it since NaNoWriMo, and that's honestly okay with me. Personally, I like to do NaNoWriMo and Camp NaNoWriMo during the school year because it actually challenges me to write, because otherwise I wouldn't have the motivation to do it. And also, as an English major, I take like several English or writing classes per semester that even thinking about writing sometimes makes me like I can't do it. Like I don't want to write all day in my classes and then go back to my dorm and write some more. So when I need a break, I take it. And when I'm doing NaNoWriMo, that's when I get my writing done. When I'm actually like writing and like trying to write like 1,600 whatever words a day, I actually do my writing before I do my homework, which maybe is not the best idea, but it always like hangs over my head, and I feel a lot more productive and like able to focus on my homework if I do my writing first.
Yeah, taking breaks is a huge thing. Um, I'm a bit of a hypocrite saying that because I am horrible at taking breaks. I'm a perfectionist, so if I don't hit my extremely like unfinishable goal by like a very unfair time, I feel really bad about myself. Like I tried to draft an entire, I think it came out to 60,000 words in 2 months. um I yeah I tried to do that, and then I felt so bad when it took me an extra 2 weeks. I felt so bad about myself. So taking breaks is absolutely essential, but it is very, very hard. Like especially with school, because school's a lot. So Cass, you are currently in the process of writing and publishing your debut solo book, as you keep saying. um, could you talk a little bit about how that feels, how it feels to like, not have it out in the world yet? Like, what's the vibe?
Oh, it's exhausting. Oh goodness. I've had this story, like I said, I've been trying to write this, not trying. I'm on the fourth draft of this story, so it's not like it has not been written. I have written this novel. It's just it's been a roller coaster. So I tried, I've been writing this for about 5 years, since I started this as a NaNoWriMo project as well. I met my goal and then some, which was a huge feat for me. It was the first time I'd won NaNoWriMo. It really impressed upon me how passionate I was about this project. And this is it's a story I want to tell. It's something from the very beginning, I said, these are all the things I don't see when I'm reading fantasy, even though there are a lot of elements that are things that I, of course, draw from inspiration, but these are the things that I like and I want to see, or I want to subvert this, or I want to do this. So it's a project I'm very passionate about. So of course, having it be 5 years later and not having it out there is super frustrating. But I know that I'm trying to be patient. The problem is I'm a major perfectionist like you, Lucy. But for me, the perfectionism doesn't help me write. It stalls me out a lot. So I spend a lot of time questioning my writing and whether it's good enough to keep going. Do I need to go back and rewrite everything that I've already spent months writing? And so it's been frustrating. I've had a lot of talks with myself. I've taken a lot of breaks, and I've had a lot of encouragement from my critique partners and other people in my life, and my husband. And I just keep going. And I know that this is going to be out there one day, and I'm going to be very proud of it when it is. But I have to tell myself that I'm not in any hurry, because my why is like Meg said, like I want to have this book in my hands. I don't really care what other people. I mean, of course, I care a little bit. I want people to like it too. I would be lying if I said I didn't care. But the big why is I want to hold this book in my hands. So I want it to be something I'm proud of. So I don't want to rush it, and I'll keep working on it. But it's coming. I promise.
Well, I cannot wait because I think it sounds amazing from what I've heard. Um, so Lena, you just published your last book in the Children of Lear, I think I'm pronouncing that right, trilogy. Congratulations, first of all. Oh my gosh, like I am so happy for you. What an amazing thing to finish a trilogy. Like what a breather. And how are you feeling? Like what's in the works for you now?
It's really bittersweet because I know I've mentioned this before on other newsletters and stuff, but these characters really grew up with me. So for the trilogy to be done and kind of on the back burner now, it feels so strange, right? I started it my sophomore year of college. They followed me through grad school and through getting married and all of these other things. So it almost feels like saying goodbye to that chapter of my life. And I'm so thankful for all the lessons I learned with this series and having the opportunity to self-publish and, have readers that connected with it means the world. As for what's coming next, I am working on new books now, right? 2 different projects. One's another young adult, new adult, kind of sitting on the border, fantasy. And the other one's actually my first jump into adult fantasy. So it's really exciting to be kind of at the first stages of drafting both of those projects because it's been so long since I've been in the conceptualization phase of a project. So that's been really exciting. They're both sitting at about 50,000 words right now. Hopefully I'll get to add to them. I had to take a break for the last couple of weeks because I've had, my real job to do. But it's really exciting to get back into the drafting trenches, and I'm excited for the next chapter of my writing journey.
That sounds great, and I cannot wait to see what you come up with because I've been sort of following those new projects on Instagram, and I am hooked from the aesthetics. And if the aesthetics are any indication, I know that it's going to be great. So moving back to sort of general questions for everyone, and this one might be hard, sorry. Why do you write, and what does writing mean to you?
I guess to kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, I write because I like the idea of having my book in my hands, and I also just telling stories. It's just something that I feel very passionate about. Obviously, being an English major, I like writing. I also really like to see representation that I grew up not really having, because as someone who's a queer person, I either see representation where the queer character dies tragically, or is just a side character, and it's getting a lot better recently, but I just never really had that representation growing up. So I really just want to provide that representation as a writer myself.
I really like that, Meg. That's great. Similarly, I do want to write more representation into novels as, a queer person as well. I don't think that there are enough characters, and especially in the fantasy realm. And I think it's so silly when people are like, "Oh, that's not realistic," and I'm like, "Guys, it's fantasy. It could be whatever you want it to be." But what writing means to me is, so I'm not a particularly eloquent speaker. I have a really hard time translating my thoughts into words out loud. But I found when I was young, because I have such a huge imagination, and I have such big ideas in my head at all the time. I live there. The best way I can translate that is in my writing. It's the only way I can really express myself without feeling like I'm just stumbling over, or rambling or whatnot. So it's kind of like my language is writing. The only way I can really feel like myself is when I can put words on a page and backspace when something doesn't sound quite right. But yeah, that's where I can kind of let myself go.
For someone who said that they aren't very eloquent speaking, that was very beautifully put, very touching, and I agree and echo that. For me, writing has always been therapy, and I am a therapist for my main job. And I think that there is such a human element to telling stories. It's how we craft meaning, it's how we translate our feelings into a narrative and make sense of them and make sense of the world around us. And I think fantasy specifically really gives us an opportunity to suspend some of that disbelief and suspend some of that reality and really have fun with, but also give ourselves a place to process some not so fun emotions like pain and grief in a way that is maybe safer as well. So storytelling and writing for me has always just been a way to make sense of, life and my world.
Yeah, I really agree with what all of you said. I know for definitely with the rescue, it gave me a chance to process how I felt about things. And it deals a lot with the expectations that different people have on different people, and how those expectations sort of stick with you even when you're no longer being expected those things. Like, this is when Dee goes to Neverland, and she doesn't really have to be that prim and proper lady anymore, but she still feels like she has to. So like even now that I'm in high school and I don't really have to get good grades, like my parents were like, you should get good grades while I was in like elementary, middle school. Like it's not really a pressure anymore. I still feel pressured to get those good grades. So it sort of took that real life element and made it fantasy, like you guys were saying. And it's a really great way to just process those emotions. And that's what writing is to me. So next question, what books/authors inspire you?
Honestly, I feel like I find inspiration in everything I read, which is like kind of cliche to say, but every single author is so different. As to like what author I personally love, I adore Neil Shusterman. I love the way he crafts his worlds in Unwind, Sight, literally everything, Game Changer. I think I have like 15 of his books. Like I just like as an author, I don't even write dystopian, but if I were to write dystopian, I would want to write like him. And like he just inspires me to like explore so many aspects because he does as well. Like in Unwind, he explores like abortion and what if it's banned, and that's like a super sensitive topic nowadays. And it's just like the way he handles it is like really like it's like horrifying, but so well written, and it just inspires me so much.
Similarly, I have a really hard time narrowing this down because I think I can find inspiration in a lot of different ways in different authors. As a fantasy writer, it's very cliche to say, but that's okay. Cliches are fine. I'm a big Tolkien fan as far as world building. I find it to be incredibly impressive, the amount of imagination that it took to create a world like Lord of the Rings. And there are a lot of writers who do the same thing, but I think obviously he's one of the most famous. To just see somebody who had such an incredible imagination, like what lives in my head, and put it all out there, and that's something that I aspire to be like. Also, when I was in high school, I read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and it was the first time I'd read something that I would consider dark. And I read it and I was like, if this is supposed to be dark, why is it so moving and beautiful? And I didn't realize you could write darkness in such a way. And so I think that inspired my writing a lot. I have a lot of friends who say, you're just such a nice, lovely person. How can you write such dark things? And I'm like, it's, it's still beautiful. It's meant to be beautiful, but in a different kind of way. So those two are big inspiration. They both inspire my writing quite a lot. And then just for funsies, I really like one of my favorite books is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I definitely relate to that book a lot as somebody who wrote a lot of fan fiction growing up and trying to transition into writing, real stuff when, because fan fiction was such a comfort place for so long. And and trying to create something original on my own. And that was a big transition for me growing up. So.
Yeah, I don't mean to keep mimicking everybody, but I'm going to agree that it was really hard to narrow it down because I was a reader way before I was a writer. And it's so hard to track how many books have just totally changed my being, because I think that's really the power of books. But I think I'll go towards the indie route and talk about a couple indie authors that really inspired me and that taught me that self-publishing did not mean a lack of quality. I know we've mentioned her already today, and that just shows what a force she is in the community, but Renee Dugan, the author of the Star Chaser saga. I picked up Darkwind and it cured a reading slump that I had had for about a year. And I just devoured the series as she released it. And it's just such a testament to the power of friendship and perseverance. And it really just informed so much of the kinds of stories that I wanted to tell as an indie author as well. And then another critique partner of mine that I've been lucky to associate with, Cassidy Clark. The Blood and Water saga is just so beautiful and takes family and really explores tropes in such a beautiful, descriptive setting. And I'm a couples and family therapist, so her nuance in those relationships is just so spot on and incredible that it really just, again, raised the bar for what self-publishing could look like. So if there are people who want to see great examples of self-publishing, and the three of us aren't enough, right? Those two are the gold standard, in my opinion.
Yes. For me, I'm also going to go the indie route. Catherine Marie's Midnight Maiden, the first indie book I ever read. And when I tell you it altered my brain chemistry, like I would not have self-published if I had not read her book. Like I, like many, was under the impression that self-publishing did mean like a lack of quality, like people weren't good enough to traditionally publish, which obviously is not the case. But her book, I was like, there's nothing wrong with this. Why are people saying that these books are bad? Like this is an amazing book, and in my opinion, it's better than Throne of Glass. Like I loved it so much, and I met her, which was amazing. And we chatted, and I was like, you know what? I have this book that I'm writing. I'm gonna write it to be published. Like I've decided I'm gonna do this. And then as for like an author that really helped me, again, Renee Dugan. She's amazing. I loved Star Chaser Saga. I love Chaos Circus. I have had the privilege of CPing for her multiple times, and she has ripped my heart out into a million pieces in the best way possible. She really is a testament to how you can still love an author after they make you cry. But I don't think that I would be the writer I am today without all these indie authors and indie books. Like, yes, traditionally published books and traditional authors have influenced me greatly, but none so like seared in my mind as indie authors and indie books. And I have one more question for Cass and Lena. You're both featured in the Of Fate and Fury anthology, which is amazing. Everyone go buy it. How is that experience different than that of full novel writing? And do you prefer one over the other?
Oh man, it was a lot of fun. It was challenging. I think in the best kind of way. It really forced me to step outside of my comfort zone because it's not the style of writing I'm used to. I am also not a short story. I used to not be a short story writer. Clearly, I'm a published short story author now. I'm a very long-winded writer. I really enjoy just like getting into the scene and just staying there. So having to have a very short word limit in my mind, for the first anthology I did was 5,000 words, it felt impossible to me the first time I tried it. And then specifically with Lena, she was very lenient on my word limit. It was originally 10,000, but she let me squeak by with 15. So I would say it was a lot of fun getting to bounce ideas off of each other and kind of collaborate with all of our stories. Because originally we all pitched different things and then somehow came together and created this sort of interwoven longer story, which was such a beautiful experience. So I'd say it's hard to say I'd prefer one over the other, but I mean, of course, I really enjoy writing my own novel because it is that control piece. Like I like to, know what I'm doing and go down that route. But it's definitely an experience I would recommend for people who are interested in putting themselves out there with other writers to try that out. I think it was really great and inspirational for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it was such a fun project because, as I said earlier, I think indie publishing can be extremely lonely. And to have 6 other extremely talented writers collaborate and help and share those successes and victories together felt amazing. And it was just we had a group chat on Instagram that was just a hub of inspiration. And there was always somebody to go to when you felt stuck, which was great. And I'm really proud of the project that we ended up creating, because even though each story is its own individual short story, I think the longest one is about 16,000 words. They all do weave together, and finding those pieces to connect really was amazing. And I'll echo what Cass said. I don't think I could choose what I prefer more. I think they were just wholly different experiences, and I'm really glad to have been able to do both.
Yeah, I think that sort of individual but like works towards a bigger story really came through in the anthology. It was really just a treat to read, and now I really want to go reread it. So I know my plans for tomorrow. So now I'm gonna open up to all of our audience here. I'm gonna start asking your guys' questions, and you guys have any more, just keep putting them in the Q&A, and I'm going to take a quick photo of them with my phone so I don't keep flipping back and forth. Okay, 1. So our first question is from Victoria. I love podcasts centered around creativity and the craft of fiction writing. Do you have any favorites?
I don't listen to podcasts, so somebody else is going to have to answer this.
I do listen to podcasts every once in a while, but I'd be really terrible at listing one right now, because generally what I do is just go onto Spotify and look up writing podcasts or craft writing podcasts, and I'll just pick an episode of something that sounds interesting to me. I would say I found a lot of them. Again, I generally look through Spotify. That's just my preferred platform, but there are tons of writing podcasts. So I would just say writing is a pretty general theme. So if you have something more specific and you kind of look through other of those podcasts and look for an episode that maybe is something like you're interested in, there are things about self-publishing, I think, then I would start there. But I'm sorry, I don't have any specifics. It's been a little while since I've listened to one.
I agree with Cass. There's plenty of resources out there if you just look for them, but there is a really good fantasy indie podcast. It's called Through the Portal. I think I did an interview for them in 2021, back when book 2 was coming out, and they've interviewed some of my favorite authors. So they're a great one if you're looking for somewhere to start, specifically self-published authors.
I also don't really listen to podcasts. I have a hard time sitting down and putting my headphones in and listening to someone talk. But the 2 podcasts that I'm familiar with that have something to do with writing is the ART podcast. I did an interview for them, and I believe Lena did as well. And also, I think it's called the Happy Writer podcast. It's led by Marissa Meyer. And she sort of talks like, she pitched it when I went to an interview with her. She was like, for everyone who's tired of hearing all the negative things about writing, only happy things in this podcast. So that's the extent of my podcast knowledge. Another one from Victoria. Any suggestions for how to find a writing buddy or a parentheses free community of creative writers to be a part of? Could be on Instagram or any other platform or website.
So I guess the first suggestion for me, I have posted on my Instagram story, like, do you want to be part of like a group chat of writers? And that's been really successful. It really depends on like your platform. Like if you have like a personal writing or like not writing account, just like regular account where you're following writing accounts, but you don't have like any like Bookstagram or Writergram, like people following you, then that's going to be a little harder. If that is the case, I would suggest going to NaNoWriMo, because NaNoWriMo has groups on the site, and I'm not really that active in them, but like I'm part of like the NaNoWriMo group for Northern Virginia. So I recommend checking that out.
That's a good point. I haven't done Nano in a while since I've been still working on the same book. But I do remember they had like a group page for each like community. Like it even had like my city. There were people in my city who were doing NaNoWriMo, and you can meet them. If you wanted something a little bit more broadly, you can do that too, I believe, if you just like zoom out on your location. But the Instagram is where I found my writing community. I knew I wanted to start looking for other writers to share my work with. I did start an author platform. It was very basic at first. It was just sort of like, here's my word count, and here, here's my writing space for the day. Just kind of little things that were helping me get inspired for writing. And then I just sort of, I would follow people, I would engage with other people, and that's where I really met people. I've been following Lena since pretty much I started on my writing journey, and it's been a privilege to be able to know her. And then obviously I've gotten to know everybody here a little bit through through Instagram. So it's a big community. I mean, there are always going to be ups and downs to it, but I think it's the best people I've met in the writing community have been on Instagram.
Yeah, I agree. I think Instagram's kind of my home base too, and that's where I found a lot of my people. I think the best way to do that is, yes, sometimes just asking and saying, hey, I'm looking for writing buddies, who else is? But also engaging on other people's posts. If you have an author or a writer who has maybe not published yet, but they have a story that's engaging to you, comment and engage on their post and form a relationship, because I think that has really led to my most successful and long-term partnerships. But for those who are looking maybe to start smaller, or if Instagram is a little overwhelming, I actually started on this website. It's called fantasy-writers.org, and they host monthly challenges for short stories where you can kind of hone your craft and you get feedback and you can actually win a prize. That's how Daughter of the Deep actually started. I needed money and it was a $25 Amazon gift card. So I was like, we're going to write a short story for it. So they give you prompts, but they also do a lot of forums, and you can post things you're working on and people will just comment and critique for free. And there was a lot of swaps on that. And it's a pretty small community there. So it's easy to kind of dip your toes in. Obviously it's specific to fantasy writers, but it's a great resource for anybody looking.
Yeah, I second Instagram. That's where I found my community. I'm not really active on Discord unless I have to be for ARC reading or something like that. And I can't figure out how to set up notifications to alert me when someone messages me on NaNoWriMo, so not really successful on that one. But I actually became friends with Catherine Marie after I read her book, because I posted a Goodreads review of her book, and she, like, I found her on Instagram and we just started talking. And it's really about, like, you don't want to go into a person's DMs unless they've explicitly said it's okay, being like, hey, could you read my work and give me feedback? Like, I like people coming to my DMs and saying hi to me, but I'm not going to critique your work if we don't already have a relationship. It's really, you want to interact, like it's been said before, you want to interact, you want to reply to their story, you want to make sure that you're saying to them that you're not just there for what they can do for you. You're there to build that relationship. Like, I'm friends with someone who was a beta reader for me, and she just started interacting with my stories, and somehow we became really good friends. And I really value her feedback, and she's also a writer. So it sort of happens overnight, but also it doesn't. It's not really something I can put into words, but it's effort. It's definitely effort to find your community, and not every person you form a relationship with is going to be the relationship you're looking for. I've definitely had some writers that I was really close to, and then things happened and we haven't talked in months. So it's not everyone's going to be what you're looking for, and that's okay. And so we have another question from someone who's anonymous. At what point in the process should you have a CP? I think I'll answer that for me. If you guys want to answer it after, that's fine for you. I finished drafting, I self-edited, and then I had a CP because I knew that there was no further I could go myself, just my eyes only on my project. So I had a CP pretty early into the process, only on draft 3, I think it was.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. I've never had a CP. I've only had alpha and beta readers, so I would not be good at answering this question.
I think a CP, it definitely depends on where you are on a sharing level, where you are in the process. For me, I am very hesitant to share my raw work with anyone. So I like to kind of write it all. So I wrote my first draft of my book and did a little bit of editing on it before I started sharing with critique partners. And I've gone through a few and I still have some of those. And basically, I forgot to mention this earlier. One of the biggest pieces of having a critique partner is you're generally sharing your work and they're sharing theirs with you. So it's like less like a beta reader because you are kind of comparing, you're reading their work and they're reading yours. So it's a trade. It's a true partnership. So it like I said before, you have to find the right fit because you may try it out. You may find somebody that you're like, hey, let's trade work, and it may not be for you, or their critique style may not be for you. But I would say when you're at the part in your process where you're thinking, I need to share this with somebody, that could be at the very beginning. You may want to start drafting and you want a critique partner at the same time. I know somebody in this meeting right now who does that way sometimes, so I'll let her talk about that.
I don't mean to laugh, but it felt like a call out. Yeah, I need external accountability to be able to keep myself on track. And it's a major flaw of mine, but I have really terrible ADHD. So if I don't have that external deadline and accountability, I don't finish things. So I typically will finish a chapter, read it back a couple times and tweak it. And then I send it to my very kind, very sweet, very gentle critique partners basically the same morning, like, here's this dumpster fire, see what you can make of it. But then I also respect and know people who will wait till they have a finished draft to get critique partners. I need that kind of motivation in order to kind of keep writing. So I do it really early on, and I'm not ashamed of my messy first drafts.
And I admire that.
So our next question is from Ash. How do I start my writing journey? I have so many works in progress that I haven't, and it ends with AV, so I'm just going to assume they mean finished.
I think there's a second part where they finish the whole question.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. That I haven't actually started, and I think that there are really good and unique ideas. I have characters and such, so I don't know how to actually start.
I know this advice is like not useful at all, but like just sit down and like start somewhere. It does not have to be like the start of the novel. It could just be like a random scene that you decide to cut later. Like personally, I like to write out of order because I get really bored when I'm writing boring scenes. And sometimes I'm like, I just don't want to do that. Or like, I don't know how to start the novel. So maybe I'll just start right in the middle of my story and then I'll fill in the beginning later. And like, obviously that ends up being a little interesting, like when I'm like editing. But like it actually is very helpful because if I don't know how to start, I just start in the middle.
Yeah, that's a great advice. I struggled with this at first. I know it before I really had a plot in my head, you have these, sometimes you just have characters or like a general idea. And I think a good writing practice, and I did this a lot when I was in college and was taking writing classes, was you would take the same characters and maybe a setting, and have writing prompts. So there's a lot of resources for writing prompts out there that's maybe just a sentence, maybe add some dialogue, and you just throw your characters into that scenario, and just see what happens. And sometimes that nothing happens, but sometimes you find some magic, or you see a perspective of that and say, oh, I could take a piece of that and really add that to, I can see something blooming from that. So that would be my advice, would be to check out some writing prompts. I've seen them all over the internet. If you just look up writing prompts for characters, or there's many ways to find them. You can find lists and lists of them. So that would be a good place to start if you're just not sure.
Yeah, I love that advice. And then I would also say kind of tell yourself the story first. So if you already have concepts and characters that you really like and you're in that brainstorming phase, my outlines kind of look like bullet points at first, and then I just keep expanding on them, and then I start actually writing. So who are your characters? What do you want them to do? What story are you trying to tell? And if the first draft of your story is literally just bullet points on a page of what you want them to do, and then you take each bullet point and expand on it, and then start trying your hand at what the voice sounds like and all of that, that's where it starts for me, at least, because I'm very similar. I will be struck by an idea, or a character will just walk into my head, and then they'll sit there until I do something with them. So yeah, just tell yourself the story first, and then you can worry about translating it to the craft.
I have a friend, her name's Z, and she has a lot of ideas. Like, I am getting invitations to her Pinterest boards at least 3 times a day. And what I've noticed is that she comes up with these great ideas that I'm super excited for, and then she never does anything with them beyond the planning phase. So I think my advice would be is to be aware of how far you think you're going to go with this story, because some stories, like I have some that I don't have the tools yet to write them, so I can't write them right now. I don't have the skill, I don't have the resources, I don't have the knowledge yet. So you have to acknowledge to yourself, you have to say, I can't write this yet, or I just need a little push with this, or this isn't a story that makes sense yet. You need to sort of know where you're at and how far that story is going to get, because you don't want to focus so much time on a story that never actually happens. And so then there's a bunch of questions from someone who I would love to say the name, but I'm really afraid that I'll pronounce it wrong. So we have more questions. Is it a good idea to self-publish first, then traditionally publish? I've heard this option and am considering it for my books.
I don't really know that much about like the difference between like, first like going to self-publish and then like traditionally publishing. I do know though that like some popular books today, like The Spanish Love Deception was first a self-published book, and I think like because it like blew up on TikTok, it was able to be picked up in like traditionally publishing. So I don't really know much about that process, but
Yeah, I think this is going to be there's not a one size fits all for this question. There are times where that works. Like she just said, like the movie, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie The Martian. That was a self-published novel that eventually got picked up and then it blew up, and now that author has book deals and publishers. So I mean, it does happen. I don't know. I know that some traditional publishing houses have, discouraged that too. I've heard it both ways, where they don't want you to self-publish first. So I think it would really just, if you're interested in traditionally publishing, if you have a route you want to go, but you want to self-publish, look into or do your research on the publishing, like different publishing houses, and make sure that that's something they do, or consider publishing under different pseudonyms. Like you don't have to, or different pen names. You don't have to, if you want to just put your books out there and then traditionally publish under a different name, you can do that too.
Yeah, I also haven't ever published traditionally, so I can't speak on that necessarily as far as if it's a good idea or not. However, I do think that there is something to be said about knowing what market is good for your book. So I know that for my first series, there was content in it that I wanted that representation, right? There was some queer representation. There was some representation of grief that I had a very strong feeling that if I went to traditional houses, they'd ask me to edit that down to make it more marketable for a certain age range or for a certain content. And I knew that that was not necessarily right for that story. And again, that goes back to that creative freedom. I wanted that space to make all my own choices. But that's not to say that I won't have other books later that I might think are good fits for a traditional route. So if you are even curious about the traditional route, I think the first step for all houses is to get an agent. And they have those fun things called manuscript wish lists. So follow some of them on either Twitter or Instagram, see what they're looking for and if your book fits. And if you really have a story you want to tell that's not sort of fitting those wish lists and that there maybe isn't that market for, maybe that's an indication that self-publishing really is the route.
Yeah, I haven't been traditionally published either, since my first book just came out. But I did do research into which route would be the best for me because my mom was really pressuring me. She's like, don't take the easy way out. Make sure that self-publishing is the way you want to go and you're not just using it as a way to skip all the extra processes that happen in traditional publishing. I do know that a lot of if you're going to go into YA, a lot of agents will not take your book if it is not a debut. That is a big thing, especially if you're going into YA. Adult, they're a bit more lenient, but with YA, they will not take your book if it is not a debut. So that's a bit difficult considering I would love to be a hybrid author, both self and traditional, but I generally stay in the young adult area. So it is a big thing to consider because you will get a lot of rejections, which can hurt your self-esteem. So really listen to what Meg, Cass, and Lena said, but keep in mind that if you do self-publish and then try to go into YA with traditional, it's not going to be as successful as it could be in a different scenario. But you will find those agents that'll take your book. And another question, how can I grow a good following to promote my books?
I think for me, at least, it was more important to grow like a genuine following than like a big following because like, sure, I have 20,000-ish followers, but like only 20 people bought my poetry collection when I published it. And like that, like I think is a lot more important. And like having a big following doesn't mean you're going to have more sales of books. It really just means like, oh, you have a big following, people just followed you. But genuine connections are the way to go.
I think Meg hit it on the nail on the head there. Being genuine is something that's really important to me as a person, and I try to translate that over into my author platform. I generally don't post anything that isn't something that I'm interested in, and I try as much as I can. This is some advice to engage with other people in a genuine way. It's fine to like somebody's post. It's fine to say that's cool or, you know, whatever, but it's those genuine connections that you're going to make. Those are the people that are going to share your marketing posts and pick up your book and recommend your stories and things like that. So I think making those genuine connections by finding what on Instagram or on your platform, what you're actually interested in engaging with, and people are going to see your genuineness and want to engage with that too. You're always going to find the people that are, you're going to draw those people in, and people are going to see the authenticity and want to be a part of that as well. So I just say be yourself.
Yeah, I honestly could not have said that better myself. I have had the same following for the last few years, right? I haven't seen like a crazy increase in followers or anything like that. But my sales went way up about a year into the life of my first book. And what I noticed was the real difference was I was engaging more with other people's work, and I was trying to really create space for other people's work as well, and trying to form those genuine connections rather than just trying to promote. So it does translate to sales, right? I don't know if you guys can see that whole shelf back there is all indie authors, because that is how I have found I can support other people. And I noticed that support really does translate. People will be in your corner if you're willing to be in theirs.
100%. And in the spirit of not echoing what everyone else is saying, I would say what's definitely helped me is posting consistent content. And content, yes, it's important to follow the trends, but don't follow the trends if they don't actually apply. Like, it's good to have a trending audio on your reel, but people aren't going to watch it if it's not following that trend, so it's not helping you in the long run. And whatever you do not delete reels. Like, if they don't have that traction in the first day, like, it's okay, because I have a reel that I posted 4 weeks ago, and it is still getting likes and views, and it's up to I think 12,000 likes now. It's still going, and it's one of the simplest things ever. So your effort isn't always going to be rewarded by the algorithm, but you need to give your effort the chance to be rewarded by the algorithm. And since time is almost up, I'm gonna have one, maybe two more questions. So how do you deal with feelings of worrying your book may not be good enough?
I mean, I'm also a perfectionist, and I deal with that constantly. And you kind of just have to accept that, in your own eyes, it's never going to be perfect. Nothing can be perfect, but it's art and it's yours. And you kind of just have to realize that you put your heart and soul into it, and that is perfect on its own, in its own sense. That's just the most important. So
yeah, I think exactly what Meg just said, and knowing upfront and telling yourself this, because this is really important. There are going to be people who do not like your book, and that's just the hard truth. It's not because it's bad. There are books out there that are very popular and beloved that I think just don't do it for me, and that's perfectly valid and okay. But there are going to be people who love your book, and there are people that are going to love your characters, and this is going to mean something really special to them, even if they don't necessarily review it or say it. Somebody out there is going to really love what story you're going to be telling. So I think just knowing upfront the hard truth of that, it's just not going to be for everybody, and that's perfectly okay. And it doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's not for them, but it is for you, and it is for somebody else. So keep going.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I can echo that. when I first started, I used to read all of the reviews I got. And it wasn't until I got 2 really negative reviews back to back that it kind of clicked for me. One called the book Undercooked and Underdeveloped. And then the next review, same rating. They were like both 2 stars. The next review was like too long, dragged, spent way too much time on detail. And that just really put into perspective for me that everybody's going to have a different perspective and bring their own tastes into reading your book, and you're not going to please everybody. You can't. So write what you want to write, and write it for yourself and for the people that it is their genre or their cup of tea. But on that same note, right, know the difference between constructive feedback and just people being, unkind or sharing a preference that doesn't align with yours. So I typically ask myself, is this feedback that I'm getting, is it something I'm actually capable of working on, right? Are they saying that I could describe things more clearly? Or are they saying that my characters could be a little bit more fleshed out? Or are they just sharing an opinion? They didn't like my main character. They weren't, a fan of the romance, right? Or they didn't like this trope. Figuring out the difference between criticism and just preference has really kind of helped me stay true to my voice and still work towards growth without shutting down, because I used to get really upset about it.
Wrong button, sorry. Yes, definitely, I agree with all of that. I'd also say, one of my beta readers was obsessed with my book. She loved every single part of it. And whenever I got some particularly negative feedback or preferences in one of my reviews, who said some particularly very mean things about me, I would go to her and I'd be like, what did you like about the story? What was good? And I have screenshots of every single compliment she's ever given me. And it really boosted me and helped me continue with drafting book 2. And as I'm gearing up to try and edit book 2, I look back at those and be like, if all else fails, I have one person that really loves my book and really wants the sequel. That's not my parents, because they're my parents and they kind of have to like stuff. But find that one person or 2 people that really, really love unconditionally love your work. And they'll love to talk about it if you ask them, hey, what's your favorite quote? They will willingly give you this information, and it's really, really a morale booster. So I don't think we have time for another question, because the rest of them are generalized questions, and I don't think we have enough time to get everyone to do that. But before I hand it back over to Michelle, I really want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for coming, for answering my DM when I asked if you wanted to do this. And it's been a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lucy.
Thank you all. I'm just going to say from Cary Library, this has really been an amazing evening, and we are so lucky to have all 4 of you as panelists sharing your experiences. I feel like I've learned a ton tonight, and I know that people joining us have as well. I would like to give a special thank you to Lucy, who made this program happen. I could get a little emotional. You are really amazing. And I am getting really emotional now. I'm just really glad that you are a part of our Cary community, because you're pretty special, and I just can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you to everyone. And I would say safe home, but we're all safe home right now. So we will hopefully see you again in the future.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.